Welcome. It's our third discussion of Paris Fashion Week, and we've got a really special panel with us because we've done an all-student panel. So you guys are from Central St Martin's and London College of Fashion, and we're going to be talking about the Rick Owens show. But before we start, I'll let you guys just tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and what you're studying, starting with you, Iranzu.
Okay, my name's Iranzu, and I'm studying MA Journalism at London College of Fashion, and I've just been interning with the Gentlewoman magazine on their latest issue.
And my name is Jet, and I study fashion communication at Central St Martin's.
I'm David. I'm at London College of Fashion. I'm doing fashion media production, which is basically like digital fashion. So I'm specialising in fashion film, currently interning at Nowness. Sorry. The rival.
Hi, I'm Imogen. I'm also at St Martin's and on the FCP course. I've recently done my placement year and have been working with Nick and Charlotte on the punk project at the Met.
I'm Andrew Smith. I study fine art at Central St Martin's and I help out around Show Studio.
So guys, before we start, I want to ask a little bit about the season as a whole, because I do want to talk to you about Rick, but I want to know what the kids are enjoying. So can you tell us like what has stood out for you this season? What shows have been amazing? Iranzu, what have you liked? I'm picking on you because you're next to me.
We were speaking about it earlier on. I really liked Balenciaga this morning. I thought it was really nice, beautiful.
What was so striking about it? Are you a fan of Alex Wang anyway?
Yes.
Yeah.
We were talking about it earlier on, and saying that it was quite Alexander Wang.
Yeah, for sure.
And probably because I like him anyway, I really enjoyed it. I just thought it was really beautiful, and when you saw the live stream, you couldn't really tell the detail.
Yeah, it was when you saw the pictures.
And when you saw the pictures, you could see that it was really considered and just beautiful.
How about you? Sorry, no, go again.
It made me want to wear short skirts again.
Really?
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. I'm sure boys will be happy. Andrew, what have you liked?
I really liked Dries this season. I really liked what he did for his menswear with the kind of really dark still life flowers, and it was nice to see an element of that brought into the women's wear as well, and kind of expanded on with the big gold structuring around the waist was incredible. And his set was amazing.
Yeah, the set was amazing. How about you, Imogen? You're nodding. Did you like Dries as well?
Yeah, I always liked Dries, and I always liked Prada. And for me, Prada was amazing and fun, and it's got character, but it's a bit nostalgic, which I quite liked. You know, some of the classic shapes and materials, but I just always loved the colour, you know, and fun from Prada. So
none of you have mentioned London designers, which is worrying me a bit because I thought you'd all go. Is there anything in London that stood out? Jet, did you see anything?
I haven't seen anything, which is the most awful thing to say here ever, but I haven't seen anything. I've been away without any internet connection, and but it's actually quite nice because we're just about to see something and it feels very fresh to me. Yeah.
David, what have you loved?
Not from London, but I really liked Fendi, which is really strange because I'd never really been into the Fendi look that much, but I just loved the this kind of like digital element that was in it, and the like really closely shaved fur and everything. It was really interesting, and just the color combinations I thought were really like spot on and really quite like fresh and like shocking in a way. And I guess from London everyone really liked Christopher Kane. That was really cool. I just liked with his men's the way he did this like 3D
like the vectors.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool, and then to bring in almost the same kind of thinking, which was really like pulling himself back and like thinking about what he wants to do with this. And I feel like he did the same thing as with his women's wear.
It was quite young, wasn't it?
Yeah,
like, really different from last season. Was like I've got money, you know. It was like fur and you know really, and this felt much more. Well, not really true to himself, but just you know he always was fun and young, and you know there was a bit of electricity to it. I liked it. I did really like it, but the last collection was like beautiful and sophisticated and.
I kind of feel like he just like pushed aside everything else and was like, right, what am I interested in?
Yeah, what do I like?
Yeah,
it did feel quite nice, you know, having been signed, you know, with the money, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
The designers you've mentioned though, are they the ones that you typically would look up to and be excited by? Because you mentioned Fendi, you said it's not someone to typically look at, but I'm interested that none of you mentioned, you know, like the J.D. Andersons or the Simone Roches or the Medium Kirchhoffs, any of the younger ones. In college at the moment, in your classes, is it those brands that you're more excited by? Because we were talking about that this morning on our Balenciaga panel and saying how actually it's a lot of the heritage brands that are really, really exciting at the moment, like Balenciaga, because they have young designers there. So I'd be interested to know kind of around London College of Fashion or Central St Martin's, are people excited by your medium curtoffs, or are they excited by Prada and Balenciaga and the big houses? Or is it a bit
more
both?
people in school, more people are talking about working for those kind of houses, not medium curtoff, not the young people, which is really interesting, because you would think that they would want to go to the people that have a more scope to be exciting in the future, but a lot of people are thinking to go to Prada or Celine or...
Is that because people have lost the drive to set up on their own because they see how difficult that is?
I think generally that feels like that anyway.
Or it's to get their sort of solid training to then go and set up on their own, you know?
That's
maybe there's a sort of a long sight aim with it, but it's true, everyone is aiming still for the big brands, you know. There's a feel of that, but people respect, you know, there's JW Anderson and Marcus and Almeida and all the St Martin's graduates, you know. It's exciting when it's the CSM MA show for me, you know. We'll watch it and it's good to see what's coming, you know, still. So they're definitely not ignored, you know.
Yeah, there's a real sense of kind of everyone being behind JW Anderson, in particular, more so than anyone else in London. I find that everyone's talking about him as if he's this really exciting thing, and we're kind of just with him, but actually where we look to for inspiration are maybe some of the bigger houses like Prada, like Dries, or Marc Jacobs.
Do you find that, sorry, I was going to say LCF, because I don't want to make the CSM LCF rivalry, I don't want to start any fights, but you know, there's always talk of Central St Martin's when we're looking at the London Fashion Week schedule. And obviously with Jonathan, he studied at London College of Fashion. Is there a sense of pride about that in the college? Do you find that people kind of root for their own in any way, or is that a bit of a simplistic way of looking at it?
I think what was happening with the London College of Fashion was that a lot of designers were leaving and then kind of like assimilating into like other places and not really keeping their identity and what they learned. So I think now we're starting to see, I mean, I don't study design, but you can kind of see it in the designers that there's like excitement because they feel like what they're doing now could potentially drive them the whole way through. So that, I guess that has happened, which is nice. And I think another thing I was going to say about J.W. Anderson is that I really like that he makes a point about talking about the process as well. So he's like, it's like he almost remembers really clearly what it's like to be a student and having to think about these things. So he does talk a lot about his creative process and what's happening and where he fits in. And I think that's really, it's kind of refreshing to see because it makes him feel like he is very like grounded.
But I also think the problem is with the sort of trendy London designers, young designers, is it gets forced down your throat by every publication of like, oh, they're so cool, they're so cool, they're so cool. You're sort of told too many times that it's boring, you know, it becomes boring. You know, you want to find something of your own that you think's cool, and you know, Prada, that might be Prada, you know, because it's casually cool. It's like, you know, there's no, it doesn't need to be forced upon you, like it just is. And so that's maybe why none of us have mentioned it straight away, because maybe it's too predictable now, you know.
You mentioned it's kind of forced down your throats by sort of magazines. I mean, just where do you guys get your fashion information? Do you guys read magazines or do you get it online? What kind of excites you for your? Because obviously we've got a journalism student with us. Where would you want to work? What excites you in terms of publications? Are you reading Vogue? Are you reading ID? Are you reading? Obviously Show Studio, but like, what's your kind of outlets that you go to?
I think it's a bit of both now. I think the internet is really exciting because, you know, it's really instant and this is an example of how it's democratized fashion and how we can now have access to almost everything, which I think is amazing. But I also really, on personal point of view, I love magazines and I love to hold a magazine. I love the object, I love to smell it. And I think that there will always be, I think people will always want to have the physical object in their hand. So I think the internet is really great in a lot of ways, but this, I'm talking from a personal point of view. I'll never get tired of magazines because I think it's that physical object that I feel like I need.
But you don't go do you go to them for news or information, or is it more for that kind of nostalgia, like having something.
I would never go to a magazine for news. I don't think that there is space for news in a magazine anymore. I think once it's printed, it's already out of date because of the internet.
Yeah.
So I think...
Is it imagery then?
Imagery, yeah, and also interviews and content that's not time sensitive, I think.
I guess that's what The Gentlewoman does really well as well. Which is,
and I think it's going that step further and researching a bit more and giving the reader something that's a bit more in depth, maybe, than the internet can offer. So.
I'm interested because Imogen, on your course, you're meant to do a magazine at the end, and you're not doing a magazine, are you doing an exhibition? What was the thought process behind that?
I just find, like, with the magazine, you know, we study this course, but I don't read a magazine because for me it's just too systematic. You know, the clothes are shown, there's a shoot, it's completely methodical and scientific, and there's no space for long articles or context or culture or, you know, some context that goes with those pictures. And so, you know, just downstairs in the show studio shop, wonderful publications with, you know, real information, not something that's frankly fake. You know, I just find them incredibly unromantic now. You know, it's a system and it's fueled by money, and there's just not space for creativity in them. So some, you know, there are, I'm not saying I own a lot, you know, and I still have to be a part of it. You know, I work and I like in fashion, and some biannual and more obscure publications do that, but so there's not sort of a regular that I buy and like, you know, and some issues are more hit than others with some magazines. So, you know, I might own a couple and like a couple of Self-Service or Purple, or, you know, and of course I have some Vogues, and, you know, but it's definitely more the independent magazines, but much more leaning towards books or old things, you know.
I think the problem is that we talk about it in digital and magazines. So there's the idea, so you said that our course does a final magazine, but it's traditionally that, but actually a printed matter can be any way of communicating what we're thinking. So I don't read magazines because I think if I look at the internet, I'll look at it for, regarding fashion, I'll look at it for, because I'm interested in seeing what Rick Owens has just shown, but I won't look at it for inspiration because...
So you wouldn't use Tumblr or something for where do you get your kind of aesthetic inspiration?
From elsewhere, because it's... No, I mean, I just can't imagine someone going on Tumblr to look for inspiration because it's so recycled.
It's already been processed.
Do you guys all agree with that? Do none of you use this?
Yeah,
I feel like this is a focus group about like what young people
what are we doing?
This is so interesting.
I think if you're looking for like really like good references and something really fresh, you can't really just be going on Tumblr. It's just, I feel like it's
exactly.
lazy.
Do you still
Everybody
use
gets
this
the
then?
same thing on the internet.
Yeah, but
So it's already been seen, it's already... I find looking at old magazines, you were saying, I find looking at old magazines is more inspiration than going on a Tumblr or Google searching images or whatever it might be. Because everybody gets the same thing online. I mean,
Apart
if you
from
can,
if you're at Show Studio,
of course, definitely yes. But you can search, I think, and you can get to things that are a bit more obscure online. But I think the most exciting thing for me in terms of inspiration is going to a library and looking at an old book. At the moment, I'm looking at covers of old books, and I just, you know, that's the kind of thing that I look for at the moment. And I think because online is so readily available, there's going to come a point where, you know, those images that you come across or whatever you come across online, everybody's already seen it at some point.
So do you feel a bit, this kind of goes back to what some of you were saying about why you're not interested in London designers, I think not interested, but you're maybe a bit apathetic towards it. Do you think there's too much fashion information out there? Do you guys feel a bit sort of bombarded by everything?
Everything's so fast.
I just feel like everything is the same with print particularly. You flick, I mean, every time I've looked through a magazine recently, I've just been really disappointed because it's just people standing, looking in one direction with their hands by their sides. And it's just like a lookbook from the 90s. And when I go online, and even if I see something rubbish, I'm more excited by that than I am by something in a magazine, because there's nothing good in magazines. Well, that's a bit of a big statement, but I mean, every time I just flick through and there's nothing that grabs me, whereas I don't know whether it's just my interest in moving image. I find that there's so many, even advertisements on websites are so much more captivating than the ones in the magazines, and they're not. I find that magazines aren't trying to push themselves in the way that online publications as such are. In the way that they're like, okay, we've got this new territory, where can we go? Whereas magazines are just existing.
It's almost becoming more
they know what they
sanitized.
do. They do it. It's formulaic, and formulaic has never really been interesting.
But I think they are trying to. I mean, every magazine has an online platform now. You won't find a magazine that doesn't, and they use online for what I think is most exciting about online is moving image and these kind of, you know.
But do you feel like, sorry to interrupt, I'm really interested in what you think actually, because I question if traditional magazines, so your titles that exist mainly in print, if they use their online to do things that is genuinely pioneering, or if the online is always kind of a sub thing.
I think it has been. Up until now, but I think that magazines, they're starting to realise that they need to make use of the resource of online, because it's something, you know, moving image, and it's incredible, and they can I think they can use both, and I think that's really exciting when you can use both mediums, and that maybe in the print version you can direct people to online, and online you can direct people to the print version, and I think it can make the experience a bit more not so formulaic, and I don't know.
But also magazines are stuck in a place where they need to deliver, you know, they need to cover every single collection that a designer's making, which is not 2 anymore, you know, it's so many, you know, and so to be a creditable magazine, they need to cover that online and in their print, or so they think to be a creditable magazine, but actually maybe we'd prefer them more if they didn't stick to the rules, you know, but they think, oh, well, if Vogue are doing it, I need to do it, if Dazed are doing it, I do need to do it, and, you know, whereas actually if they just went, well, we don't care, like, we're not going to cover resort, pre-resort, this, you know.
That would be amazing.
Stuck in a cycle.
Yeah, it's stuck in a horrible cycle.
Where
Someone
we
needs to
feel like
balance it.
there's a way to do it, and we have no idea. We're talking about magazines have an online base, and online magazines have a print base, but we're not really talking about anything else. Like that's kind of.
Yeah, they're just keeping up with the Joneses, but in a very bad way.
It feels very 50s to me, magazines. Like,
So
even
who's
still.
getting stuff right? Who are you guys? You threw out some titles before, but what are you guys excited and inspired by? Because I love it. It's quite quaint. You all said books, which I really love. But is there anything?
I think the likes of Grey is really, really nice, because it comes as a book, and it's kind of saying that we're not trying to be a magazine that is very instant, and they're just disregarding any sort of news, and I think that's really nice, where you just see like a fashion book. Maybe that's where it's going to go.
So is news the problem? Is that what we're
I
trying to bring this focus
Yeah.
on, covering every collection, covering news?
And I think magazines will become objects of desire in the future. It won't be about, you know, I mean, maybe it will be a monthly magazine, but I think it'll be something that you want to keep on your shelf and refer back to, because it's not time sensitive. It's, you know, it's got interesting people, and it might be a really interesting thing to look back on in years to come, because it's kind of like a diary of the times.
But isn't that essentially a book? What we're saying is
Well,
we're
yeah,
interested in
maybe.
books, we're interested
Maybe.
online, but we're not interested in magazines.
But they are magazines.
No, because
they're still doing self-service that you mentioned. They do.
and also it doesn't have to be something we've mentioned. Like a magazine could be just a printed matter, you know. So I think saying magazine is obsolete is not right. That's not what that's not what I think. But I think there's a new way to do it. You know, the system is
has to
restrictive.
change.
So
Yeah.
it's more the system than this idea of print versus digital. It's
but
more
also
about.
I think ultimately, like a variety. You know, for one magazine to encapsulate my whole imagination is never going to happen. You know, so. And nor is one book or one author.
That's really interesting, because I think 30 years ago people would have said something very different. The fashion was a lot more tribal, and maybe it was a lack of access, but people would have said that like they loved reading ID when it was really good because it did encapsulate their whole imagination.
Yeah.
But do you think that's really changed for your generation? You never feel kind of fulfilled or satisfied in that same way?
Informed, really. I mean, when you read ID, it's kind of weird to read it now from when the first issue came out. But if you imagine yourself there reading it, I feel like that would be something exciting that you'd be informed about. But I feel like, I mean, really, there's nothing, I feel patronised a bit at the moment about, in terms of articles about what's being fed, and that's really why I don't buy magazines. I think, like, The New Yorker is probably the only thing that I read in terms of a magazine, because it's
Just good
really
journalism.
interesting.
Yeah.
Like, it's amazing,
Yeah.
you know, and I think that's what's really lacking in terms
Yeah.
of journalism.
I feel no sense of loyalty to specific publications.
That's what I mean
in
about the
magazine.
tribal thing. Yeah.
Whereas I think that tribal element is more present on the internet, where because I see people referencing, if I'm talking about a collection with one of my friends, they will always use the same website to show me an image of that publication, of that look, and I find different people have their different sources, and that is more tribal than the way that I look at magazines, whereas I'm like, that one's nice, that one's nice, that one's nice.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I would, me and my friends generally focus on one source of information online.
Mm.
But I think something, like, I really like printed publications and magazines, but I think it's all changing really, really fast. But like, magazines had such a long like process of development. If you look at like really, my flatmate, she studies like history and culture of fashion, and she has these like massive volumes of annuals from like the 20s and 30s. And you look at that process going to what we had, let's say 10 years ago, and then suddenly everything was like shaken up. So I think there's still a space for magazines to find their feet and to still continue, and then for digital to be complementary. So you've got we'll say a magazine that has an accompanying app and then a website as well. And all of these things can still exist together. But it's just that I think it's this transition that happens so quickly. That's kind of the hardest things for magazines to deal with. And it's a shame that so many magazines are like folding when this is happening.
But there's so many magazines. If you go to like one of the independent news agents in Soho, it's like, I'm overwhelmed with how many publications are out, and new ones coming out all the time, and I think, who actually reads all of this now? Like,
But you're looking at it because you write, you do journalism, but I mean, I don't think a lot of people do read them. I think a lot of people look at them.
yeah,
which is
I guess a magazine nowadays can be almost like it's almost like a portfolio for whoever creates it, but to actually earn a living from it, you can't. You have to do something else. You have to write for someone else, or you have to generate your income in another way.
I think that's a really interesting point that Jet said, you know, that people don't read. Do you find that because I definitely found this when I was doing my MA, because I did a journalism MA. Do you worry about that, studying journalism? Do you worry about the quality of fashion criticism, the quality of fashion journalism? Like, we have so much of the focus is, you know, social media, like video content. Do you worry about being a writer and think, actually, where's going to be my space? I don't want to make you worry about it if you don't. So I'm like, your career is doomed.
I think everything is so much more visual now.
Yeah.
But I think it's also, I'm quite happy the course that I'm doing at the moment has actually made me look at journalism from a more visual point of view as well. And I think that's been quite nice for me, because you don't really think of it in that way, I think, when you start to study a journalism course, but it's actually really visual, and we have to do a lot of things that are not just right. So I think nowadays you can't...
It's more about curating.
Yeah.
That's a really overused word, but...
In a way, yeah. It's kind of, you have to have a broad knowledge of everything that's involved with, for example, creating a magazine, or you have to have some kind of visual culture, or have looked, you know, that's what you need for fashion anyway, to work in journalism, I think. I don't know what will happen in the future with magazines but I find it really exciting at the moment, because it's in kind of this transition, it's in this stage where we just don't know what's going to happen in the future, and that's quite exciting as well. I'm not worried about it at the moment.
That's good. No, don't be worried, be excited.
Speak to me when I finish
I think the fact that you're going into the industry like now with that attitude means that it is going to change. I think it's going to be in like 10 years' time. I'm confident that it will, like all of these different medium will have like found their place. Really.
Yeah. I really want to talk about Rick Owens, but I have one more question to ask you guys, because Andrew, you mentioned Moving Image, and I know that several of you have a real interest in fashion film, so yourself, Imogen, and David as well. What do you guys find so exciting about fashion film? And secondly, would you like to see more collections presented rather than as a runway show as fashion films?
Yes. Well, we're a generation brought up on moving image. I mean, this has been said for, 60, 70 years. It's not a new statement, but we're interested in moving image, and there's something about our generation, the MTV generation, where something has to grab you immediately, and I think there's more potential for that, and there's more potential for kind of emotional communication with moving image, where if you look at a photograph in a magazine, it's just a still image, but if you look at a moving image, you don't just have the image, but you have 24 images a second that you're being bombarded with, as well as the audio, and there's just so much more potential for communication from the designer. So it's obviously the most amazing way for a designer to communicate their vision, and we're looking at the Rick Owens show in a second, and the majority of people who are going to be looking at clothes are going to be online these days. I mean, there's 50, 100, maybe 200 people in a show, but actually there's going to be thousands, hundreds of thousands even people looking at it online. And so if you're doing a rubbish catwalk photo that really doesn't show the clothes, that maybe they're a beautiful black garment with amazing details, that you've just got a straight woman walking down the catwalk, and it's a silhouette, you can't tell anything, that's really not commercially viable, really.
But from a I was going to say that's a very commercial way to look at it, because you're thinking about who can really feel this, like as close as you would if you were watching the show. And just to kind of like oppose that, I think that there's something at the moment that I'm kind of picking up on, which is about really feeling something firsthand, not from a video. And I agree, it's a lot different and actually a lot more improved communication in video. But then there's something quite amazing, as we're about to see the Rick Owens, it looks like a lot of movement, and it looks like something I would really want to be at. And for those 200, 500 people that are there, maybe that's like maybe that's just a really good thing that's happening that they can see.
But then why show documentation of it online at all?
But why show anything then?
Yeah,
maybe
that's what I'm saying.
That's a lovely, maybe not.
Maybe.
I think that's a really interesting point.
Yeah,
the Tom Ford recipe, because it is kind of like, if this is just for the people in the room, don't show anything online. Because to me, and I think when we go to the show properly, it does feel very bizarre that the way you access this online doesn't capture the mood of the collection at all. So would you rather see shows that are really theatrical, really spectacular? Would you rather not see them then?
Well, I think, there are streams that I've seen of shows like the Plato Atlantis one, which so perfectly captures the mood of the show, and you can do that as well. But the designer needs to make a decision as to whether they're going to be exclusive and withdrawn and presenting it inside this bubble, or whether they're going to present it to the entire world. You can't really straddle the two things, because it doesn't work.
Digital content is kind of done half-hearted. People are like, oh, we'll do catwalk images, we'll do a stream, it won't be very good, but would you like to see a really good live stream?
As conscious a decision as it should be.
That's interesting. Would you guys agree with that?
I agree with that completely. It's not a conscious decision. I mean, with anything that happens in fashion at the moment, you can find it in several different places, and it's never an original experience, really. Which I'm not saying that's the best thing ever, but I think there's something about a show that is just an amazing thing to be there. And people talk about shows from the 90s that they were at, and I think that's kind of an amazing thing.
I think that is amazing, but I think times have changed. I think, and I'd be really, really interested to get you guys' opinion on this, because I would question, as someone who does go to the shows and experience that and adore that, what the point of shows is anymore, because it feels like they're not just for those like 50, 200 people in the room. They are used in some way as a kind of a PR or branding exercise, but it feels like no one's quite got the recipe right, because he is putting this out there, so he's using it for a PR thing, but he's not giving us anywhere near as good an experience as you'd get if you were at the show.
But maybe we should sort of hold on to that last archaic thing, maybe it doesn't make sense, but maybe that's what's great about it, so I find fashion film exciting, but not necessarily to represent a collection, film's exciting for me on other elements, but for a collection I still think a show is a wonderful thing, and we don't need to rationalise it. I think it's one of fashion's fabulous things that we can still have and enjoy, it doesn't have to have a reason.
Do you agree with that, David? What do you like about fashion film? Is it to show collections, or is it more
Well, I think I'd be perfectly happy if like everyone entering a show had their phones like confiscated and they couldn't tweet or have any images and there was no live stream. I think having the show, and I do agree with this point about like being there, it's incredible. Like the film, it's kind of what Andrew was saying. It's more so about like this emotional, I guess, whatever they want to invest in this. So like in some fashion films, and some of my favorite fashion films, you barely see their clothes. So I think having these like runway images is really, really nice from the collection. I don't know, like at the moment I still see them as being very, very like different things and completely separate. I don't know if a fashion film, especially the direction it seems to be going in now, I don't know if that would ever replace a show or ever replace like those images either.
So what do you think is the best way for a designer to get their work across? Because when we all started looking at the images, we were like, oh, we can't really see this, we wish we were there. Would you rather see less coverage online? Would you rather see really good live streams? What's kind of the answer?
I would rather they just considered it and saw what was applicable to their own practice as a designer, because I think every designer is different, and the way that Miuccia Prada does something is completely different to the way even Marc Jacobs does something. It just one system would work for one person and wouldn't work for the other. And I don't think there's any point in trying to be generic about your expression of your work, and that's a problem as well that I've had with print advertisement, is that it's just so generic. It's just, people need to consider what they're saying through their garment, or what they want to say through their mode of presentation, and that's not being done in the way that it should be.
You feel there's too much keeping up with the Joneses? Someone said that expression before, and that sums things up.
But that's in terms of, I mean, you can create an amazing piece of advertising, but it's still on the same crap paper that everything else is on. And it's about, you said about having an object. I don't feel like magazines at the moment are an object, or that you want to smell them. I think I feel that about paper and about material things, but only sometimes, and not with anything at the moment. I mean, I was looking the other day at the first, I think it was the second ID, and it made my heart like skip a beat, because it was just like stapled, and the paper was cheap, I mean really cheap, and you can't get cheap paper like that anymore, or print that cheaply. And there's something kind of like, I kind of forgot my point now, but it's really special about that anyway.
You thought it was special?
Yeah.
I think I often look at old magazines, and that's what makes me, like you said, it made your heart skip a beat. That's what excites me. Looking at Nova from the 1960s, and and smelling that and feeling it, and it's just amazing.
It's the texture, which I think it's kind of, I think your point's really good, because you don't get that, but it's not just about the images, I think it's about the quality.
The thing is, magazines are great, they're just not being great at the moment.
But they're great tools.
But
maybe in 20 years' time, the magazines of today will be great.
You're going to make them great. I love our magazine advocate. She's like, no, they will not die, I will make them amazing. Let's talk about Rick Owens a little bit, because I feel like you guys are all very articulate and intelligent. We could go on forever, but let's talk about Rick Owens. Is he a designer that you guys are excited by? Someone say yes, please. Andrew, you've spent all day reading about Rick Owens.
He's one that can go either way. I was saying to one of my friends that there's a lot of bad taste in his aesthetic, but it's made up by the rest of his aesthetic, which is impeccable taste, and it just comes across as this incredible thing that is bordering kind of gross, but also amazing.
I interviewed him after his menswear collection. I went backstage and spoke to him, and he said that he loves aggression and he loves to make people slightly uncomfortable, but in a friendly way, which I think kind of summarises what you said. And he described himself as the big bad evil queen of fashion, which I thought was quite funny on lots of different levels.
My concern though is that what he says a lot of the time doesn't necessarily match up with what he's putting into the clothes. He said that he's really concerned with aesthetic of drag and being really camp, and you look at his clothes and you think, no, you're not. Your clothes are totally not even concerned with gender, and that comes across as androgynous, but it's just like, here's a body, let's put something on it.
They appeal to that audience at the same time, and maybe that's him saying it, or maybe that's a subconscious thing he put through. I don't know, but I think it definitely has an audience that is very, very gay.
Camp,
What do you think of the designers' personalities? Because obviously Rick Owens has this theatrical element to him as an individual, and he puts himself out there in a very interesting way. Do you guys like to purely look at the clothes, or do you find yourself very interested by certain figures, whether it's Marc Jacobs, who's also kind of done that thing of making himself a personality? Is that still something that excites you guys?
I actually, with Rick Owens in particular, I do find it really interesting to read about him and what he's saying. I think it's because he's always trying to do this like juggling act where he's doing his Estonian death metal band that he had in his like men's show, but then and I read that interview that you're talking about where he says about, I think he even says like he's a Disney like
yes.
He's just he's trying to downplay it. And I think, like when I was reading about his pop-up shop that he has on Redchurch Street, he's talking about this shop, and it's like obviously this like concept that he has and he's wanted to do for a long time. And then he downplays it, and he's like, well, to be honest, he's like, it's the same as me putting a sandwich board around me and walking around saying like, come to my shop. He's like, don't take it too seriously. It's whatever, 100 square feet.
A nightclub.
Yeah.
That's also quite fun. I mean, I think any designer with a character, like, you can sit and criticise it, but better having a character than not. So, you know, go for it. You know,
so
I
you
might
prefer
not,
it when people...
it might not be my taste or my cup of tea, but it's more interesting.
Yeah, it makes the story, the whole story of the label, more interesting for people to know about. I think it's interesting, yeah.
Should we have a look at what he did for this season then?
Yeah.
To give a bit of context, because obviously we don't have a stream, which we've discussed for various reasons is both annoying and not annoying, various different, people can review that bit of the conversation. But this was, he recruited step dancers from US sororities, so, and it's all kind of street cast, and he's tried to use sort of plus size models, and well, they're not models, they're dancers, you know, so none of these are typical models. And the whole catwalk was done as a kind of dance performance. So should we have a look at them? So let's go back a little bit to what we were talking about, because it's really, really sort of important when looking at an image like this. I would say, what is the point of seeing this as a catwalk image? Would you guys agree?
Yeah, that's true.
Yes. Why would you do a show like this and not live stream it? We can't get this.
Well, what we do get is that she's got like really big thighs, and that's like amazing. And like even the fact that you said plus size model is like
no, but incredible. I completely disagree, because the point is the mystery. Like those magazines or these past print publications we're talking about, there's no film in so those pictures that I love to look at. Like, you know, you don't need to have it all. You know,
do you think there is any mystery? Because I do agree with what you're saying, and I'm all for mystery. But then there are going to be vines of this, there are going to be tweets from this, so it's almost like we will get a picture, but it'll be a half picture. And I think if we're going to get 90% badly, why not get 100% beautifully?
So what? So a film of it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Because I feel like a collection like this, it's not about the clothes, if we're honest. It's about putting across the Rick Owens idea. And I think that's what he does with his shows in a really interesting way. And just to give him a plug, because I love him, but Alex Fury writes some really great pieces about kind of this idea as the show to get across a mood. He did a brilliant one recently that was on Business of Fashion. And I think something like this, why give across your mood so comprehensively and excitingly to 200 people when you could give it across to...
Because they're the select 200 people, and this image says so much more to me than any other catwalk image of just a thin model. So there is a point in that image, because that's an actual image. It's not just a picture of a model. That's an image in its own right.
But the thing is, I mean, in my work I do a lot of performance, and I have to consider how I'm going to document that. And this is not good documentation of a performance.
I think maybe there was a problem, do you think? Because it does seem very weird that they haven't done a video. Maybe there was a problem.
They don't usually stream.
Okay.
And that's what was so interesting with that amazing concert that they did for the men's. You know, it was so talked about, and then I was writing my review of it afterwards, and I was trying to capture the mood, and I found that my review, 90% of it ended up being description, because you couldn't actually analyse the show properly without having to explain to everyone what happened. And I thought this is a real shame, because it's either like, I either have to ignore this, or I have to document it, as Andrew said, and I was like, why am I documenting this? It's like, he should be documenting his show better.
But undoubtedly, now, you know, knowing that people do stream and there are films, obviously I would like to watch the film now, but I still get an energy from the pictures. You know, you can tell there's something going on, not just models. You know, it's not models.
You do get something from it, obviously, but I think this kind of show, I mean, it looks like a spectacle, like the menswear, and I think it's something that if you're going to do it properly, you know, show us it all.
Do we like theatrical shows? Is that something you guys are still, because people talk a lot on these panels about how the fashion show has become less exciting and it's become very like back and forth. Are you guys still excited by this idea of a theatrical show like Lee McQueen used to do, or like we see at Medium Cut Job? Is that something that's still...
I think so. I mean, I saw a lot of 80s performance shows, you know, I was watching at the V&A, and like there is some, if it's done well, and maybe they just look good because it's so 80s and candid and amazing, but you know, maybe a contemporary version, I don't know, you know, there's always this sort of pining for the past, but I think this performative element is, you know, it's fun, it's great, you know, it's like taking it a lot less seriously, and it's quite nice to see, you know, it obviously happening again. We can't watch the video, so I can't tell exactly, but you know.
Like Moschino was great.
Yeah, Moschino was amazing.
Yeah. See, that was really good because I think it didn't detract from the collection because it was at the beginning and at the end.
That's interesting.
You know, the performance. But I think with Rick Owens menswear for with the metal band, I think I don't know who saw that show and actually knew what the clothes were about at the end of it. You couldn't get the clothes from that. They were running down the catwalk, and all you could look at was the guys on the drums, like vertically spinning around. That's all I could look at. I couldn't, and I think that in a way could be a mistake for a designer.
Well, I think that's a problem we're having with these images as well. Is I'm seeing bad images of people dancing, and I'm not really seeing any clothes.
Well, we haven't mentioned the clothes yet. I think that's quite an interesting point. You know, straight away you're drawn to the casting, you're drawn to what's going on there, what performance is happening, but are you drawn to the clothes? I don't think that, as much as I really agree with what you say about it being an image in itself and that makes it interesting, but it's not an image that conveys clothing well, and this is a fashion show. I don't know if you guys...
But also, like this, even what we're seeing here is we're not seeing a photographer who was... Okay, well maybe they were, but it doesn't seem like they were briefed on what was going to happen because they were like at the standard positioning. So if you're going to do a dance performance, like I'm looking at these images and you're wondering what the dancers are doing behind this guy, and you're wondering about like, I mean, it's movement, it's like three-dimensional, so it should be, I don't know, even if it's shot from like slightly elevated position or from the side or something.
But again, shock element, more fun, you know, it's too systematic, so...
I think these images to me, and they're not trying to give me anything, because I think in that case they would have shown a video, but I think all these are, and I think all they ever are really from a show like this is for PR to say, can I have look one attached image, you know?
But I agree with you, but that's not what they are for though, because if you think that's how everyone views the collections, if that's all they were for, I'd be like, yeah, do this, it's really like efficient.
Yeah, unfortunately they're for something else, so they should be more standard and boring. So that's the sort of like unfortunate system again, you know, like we're all criticising it because you can't see it properly. And maybe a show's never supposed to be a performance, but I think there is an element of that we miss, you know, it's, oh, this is a show, it shouldn't look like that. Oh, the photographer should have been briefed, you know.
But they're facts. These are facts of what happened at the show, and that's all I really see it as, you know.
And I also don't mind it, you know, that it is that and that it's wrong, you know. I don't think it is wrong, or they should have stood there, or we should see that, you know. It's nice that it just...
So do you not feel like that's really... we always talk about how fashion's become more democratic in terms of who can see it, but it doesn't sound to me like any of you feel entitled to see fashion. You don't feel like you should have as much access to this as all the editors that are there. Do any of you have that feeling?
No.
Oh no, I don't think so.
That's really interesting to me.
But I do, just to go back on that point, I do feel like if you're still going to photograph it like this, like if you're still going to present these images, then why not adapt a little bit to the fact that it was a performance? And I'm completely happy to wait if Rick Owens wants to make a film and it's 2 months' time. That's absolutely fine. Or I have to go into the store and see it, that's fine. But I just don't see why this should be, like for a lot of people, this is all they'll see of Rick Owens, like his, you know, footprint for the season. And that's not really fair.
Maybe that's what he wants.
That's his chosen.
But I feel like this isn't.
I feel like
it's not what he
it
wants.
shouldn't be.
This is just a photographer
Yeah, but maybe he is making a film, but try filming that, you know. Yes, you can have some close-ups and some lighting, but it's just the set, you know, there's only so much more you can do, but maybe he's now going to create another film with those dancers, and, you know, that's something I understand, but just creating a film for the sake of creating a film.
Yeah, no, I don't agree with that.
But I don't.
No, I agree.
just think getting the music and getting, like, pacing and these kind of things
just would help so much. Obviously was a choice of music here that would have gone with it, you know.
But there's a choice of music, there's a choice of casting, there's a choice of performance, so why is there not a choice of where you position the photographer in relation to the models?
Can I ask, why don't you feel like you have as much right to see this as kind of editors? Because it feels like I love it, there's a real conservatism in a way to like the show, and it's right that, you know, these people who have jobs get to go see it, we're students, like we will view it online.
I don't think it's that.
No, it's not like...
I mean, if I'm like, sometimes I just want to go to a show and I will get in to that show, and it's almost like a horrible experience because you feel like you're lying or something, and it's just the way it is. And in a way, if you want to really see that show, you see it. You just see it. You just make sure you see it. But if you don't, you don't. And it's forced if you have to. And I think it's sometimes nicer just to let it wash over you. And actually, this is fine. And it makes me feel like it's fine for those people to have seen that and not me, because if it's me, it's everyone else in the room and it's everyone else outside, you know, it goes on and on. So
but do you not, it's a pity in a way that none of you are design students, because I wonder sometimes, given that collections are really whittled down and put into a commercial collection, and often for a designer, their show is their one chance to put out their real artistic output for that season. You know, half the looks on that catwalk won't be produced, so it's really their chance to kind of say, this is my vision, and then it gets whittled down by lots of other people. And to me, it does feel slightly strange that you guys who are so passionate, clearly really passionate about fashion, you don't get to be engaged with that. It's just these kind of 200 people in a room, but in the same way an artist would want people to engage with their work.
But I think it's that we don't need to be engaged at that close level, you know, and it's quite nice sitting on the back seat and actually, you know, I don't need to be there writing a 5-minute review on my iPhone. I can actually sit here and enjoy it and look at it slowly and compare it to other things, you know, like, and that's quite nice, you know. We don't need to be there. So again, it's a bit forced, you know, to appear dressed up in my Rick Owens jacket, you know, and try to get in. You know, if I am supposed to be there, I'll be there, you know.
But also
so
an artist, sorry to interrupt you, an artist chooses who their audience is by, well, if they can, they'll choose who their audience is by where they'll show. So if they're showing at, the V&A, then you can go and view their show. But a designer usually has a certain number of seats, just the way, it's a fact of
but they are choosing to show it to everyone. We're kind
in
of
a way, in a way.
But
so
just to pick up on that point is that I've been to art galleries and exhibitions where I've gone in and it's been packed and it's been really almost disrespectful to the work because there's so much going on, there's so many people in the way, you can't see the work. You kind of want your art gallery to be like a church in that everything's sacred and still, and or like a graveyard, everything's dead. Whereas, and I think the same is present here. You want your show to be a select few people. It needs to be that sacred moment that not many people experience. Whereas if you have like hundreds of thousands of people there, all the people that want to be there, it becomes a bit of a rabble and a market, and that's not, it's detrimental to the experience of the show.
What do we think of the casting? Because we've talked about this a little bit. Do you guys enjoy, let's have a champagne top up and then we'll go back. I feel like this is a bit weird, plying students with there are like posters about this in your college, like join in moderation.
I don't think it's plying, I think it's gently.
We're quite
welcome.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about the casting, because I'm endlessly fascinated by your views on how we should present fashion, but I do think we should focus a bit on. Do you guys are you fans of street casting? Do you find it refreshing to see? You know, you said she looks amazing. Look at her thighs. Is it nice to see a view that isn't just like a size 8, 6-foot model?
Yeah, I mean, to me, the idea when people say plus size, they have like a language where they speak about models that aren't. To me, I find that really disgusting. The way that we're talking about this woman as something different, because this
Something
is women.
that's bigger.
Yeah.
She's
is
a
real.
woman. She is a woman, and it's just, that's what we should be talking about.
But do you see that at your colleges, at any of the students there, like they're all designing on a size 8 fit dummy?
Yeah, I
is
think
there any kind of conscious?
You have, I mean, when you design to a size that you want to show on, really, if you're making clothes. So a lot of those people do that. Designers do that, and I don't know. I think it's
a strange cycle. It's hard to
Yeah.
break. I think that's what you're kind of implying. It's because it's not just about choosing to show; it's choosing to design to a new fit, as you say.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Which enters a whole new world of problems and funding.
For them.
Yeah, for them. They can't really just design everything size 14. Then who's going to stock it? Again, you enter into the system and it doesn't
Who's
really
going
work.
to shoot it?
Rick Owens can do that because he's got enough money, or he's got a following, or he can make one key gimmick collection of and I'm not discrediting it. It's it's interesting, or it's creditable that he's done it, but he can also do it. It'd be kind of not odd, but how would this St Martin's designer or LCF designer do it? Is it feasible for them?
It's a shame not to have a designer here, because
it's
funny talking from a point of view of what you don't do.
Exactly.
But I think if I was a designer, I would be thinking about casting. So you'd think about who will wear my clothes. And I think when we've worked with a lot of designers from CSM, they talk to us, we need a model that's really tall, and she needs to be size 6 to 8. Like, they're panicking about it because they've made that garment to fit that girl in their head, but actually it wouldn't be that much. I mean, they're not going to, the people in third year aren't selling their clothes, so they can make it to anyone they want, but they don't choose to, and I think that's a problem in people's minds.
The initial idea,
and I think it's like a bit, this is why I'm really happy to see this.
But this casting has brought out something that I would never imagine in Rick Owens' clothes. It's kind of, with the trainers and the dancing, it's very street, and I would never associate Rick Owens with street.
But I think he often has a sort of tribal sort of element, these sort of, cult women, he creates a cult, and it's maybe a bit like that.
I think this feels a bit more towards like a collaboration as well, just because it's the fact that it's all like it's a dance troupe as well. Or did you? Sorry, you said it was street casting, but it's just this idea.
It's recruited from dance groups. You're correct.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like one of those things where it's not just like this token, slightly like plus size model coming out. It's just this idea of
these women looking pretty authentic.
Yeah, and that's, I think, just a really fascinating way of doing it. It's brilliant.
The thing with Rick Owens' clothes as well is that you imagine them to be really big and structured and impractical, but actually they're really practically made. I was looking at one of the garments today. It had leather on top and this kind of stretchy material under the arm, so that you can lift your arms quite high. They all have big pockets. They're actually really easy to move about in, and that's something as well that's being brought out by showing people dancing in these clothes. He's saying, really actually, you can move really well in my clothes.
And don't you think these women look far more comfortable than any model I've seen on any of the runways? They're actually a living person. I think that's really refreshing.
Real, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just me, or does I see a Rick Owens woman as quite a small woman that's got heels on.
A really pasty white woman as well.
Yeah, and
it's
someone
good
I
to
can't
see
really relate with. And to see this is like, it makes me think, oh yeah, like I could totally do Rick Owens now. I think it's changed. It's like the opposite almost.
It's very different. And the trainers is that the collaboration with Adidas?
Yeah, it is.
So maybe that's why he wants it to be more street and...
But is it nice, we've talked a lot about the casting now, but let's talk a little bit about the clothes. Do you think it is mainly the casting that's making it look more sporty? You mentioned the Adidas trainers that he's been working with Adidas on, but do you think the aesthetic has changed, or is it more the way it's being presented?
Maybe it's the way it's being presented. Although everything's quite short, and I usually think of sort of long draping, flowing. It does feel quite short.
Also, I think we're seeing more like bright. I know he's always like so monochrome, but I think we're seeing more like white clothes than like darker clothes. So it's like not quite as shadowy and dark as he usually is.
It feels really like happy just looking at that. I don't know why. It just
it energizes you, doesn't it? Which is not so. I think Rick Owens someone to, it's slim, pasty women. I think there's an element that Rick Owens' clothes are clothes to stand in and look amazing in a gallery, but this is like their clothes to put on and like dance around in, which is This goes back to, don't want to get stuck in that cycle, but this does go back to this movement idea, and I think in a way it's quite interesting to see a flat image of someone moving in clothes, because as much as we always say, well, it would be nice to see it in movement, when we do see movement, it's slim models moving in a film, but to see women actually moving in a still is quite interesting. Sorry, that was really badly explained, but do you get what
I think so. I was thinking this is actually, I mean, this is not what, I don't think this is what he intended, but this is actually quite cool to see stills like this, because they're like in these weird positions.
Odd positions, yes.
And
the clothes can't hide behind anything.
But it feels like it's meant, this, I mean, looking at this particular show, it feels like it's meant to be these weird, awkward stills with these kind of big girls doing these funny, it feels very meant, and I like that. I think it's kind of right for this, in a way.
It's like what we were saying about him occupying that really awkward space between everything. He's like, it doesn't really fit and it's a bit strange, but actually that's exactly what he wanted from it.
It just feels like a bit of a breath of fresh air, like to see normal women, to see a lot of black women on a catwalk. To me, that is incredibly refreshing. Having sat on these panels and looked at endless, like very skinny white women, I find that really...
It's good to see the clothes with someone inside them, whereas usually they're kind of draped across it.
It just kind of hangs, doesn't it?
Everything hangs, whereas this is actually holding to a shape.
And there's like arms and legs.
And for me, this shows off his skill as a designer. It's what you were saying about going and inspecting the clothes in Harvey Nicks before, you know. For me, it shows off his skill more, because he can't, it's very easy to hide when it's on a body that isn't really a body, that's obviously incredibly derogatory to a model, but it isn't a kind of difficult body, you know, it's a very beautiful, very slender body that shows off, because clothes do look better on thin people, but
that's why it's
the standard. But to see this look amazing, and she looks incredibly beautiful on a shape that is more normal and not just designed to wear clothes, I find that really interesting.
But there have also, that said, been some not so flattering shapes. I mean, one particular image has stayed in my mind of a woman and she was wearing something way too tight and you could see all the folds of...
In this show?
Yeah.
And I think that's quite cool, because it's like she's just awesome.
That's like how things fit sometimes. Just have to wear it.
And I think this collection is not about looking good, which I think is quite interesting. You know, it's not about trying to look polished. You know, it's saying that's not what high fashion is about. And this kind of leads me to a question I wanted to ask all of you, which is your ideas of what's luxurious and your ideas of what's aspirational. When you're buying clothes, when you're investing in, I don't know if you guys buy designer clothes, if you search on eBay or if you buy your stuff vintage, but when you're buying your fashion, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to look polished? Are you trying to are you trying to sort of have a sense of luxury? Are you trying to express yourself? Are you trying to just wear something that's really fun? How do you approach fashion on a personal level? You will look really scared of that question. Imogen, I'll ask you, because I've asked you this before. So
I think it's difficult, and it might change day to day or week to week. You know, I don't think there's a set formula. You know, I sometimes I buy designer clothes, sometimes I don't. It depends if I've got some money at the time. You know, obviously I mostly buy my clothes either from designer or like charity shops. High street, I think, is very uninteresting, and designer, obviously, just because it's well made, it's been thought about, and the same for a charity shop. You know, it might be something old that's been considered before. So they're my sort of two main. I don't know. I don't think I'm looking for a particular image. I just think it's what you want to wear that day, or you know, that week. You know. It varies.
But do you still think of high fashion or designer clothes as something aspirational, or do you just think of it?
No, it's much of the same. You know, it might be for me one day I might really feel like wearing something, but then the next day I might be equally as comfortable as something I found at a charity shop. That's not the ultimate aspiration for me at all.
Do you guys agree with that? Is that similar to you?
I tend to just buy like a lot in bulk, very cheap, and then just like sift through it and just. I think like if I go into a shop and it's something's £1, I'll just buy it just to see. It's kind of like this idea of just. I don't have an idea about how I dress or how I buy clothes, but it's just. I think it's easier, and I think we're all still really young, and it's quite fun to just do what you want and kind of experiment, and you don't need to like. I mean, we don't really have, I speak for myself, but I don't have the funds to just like, you know, I want that look, so I'm gonna, you kind of just have to, and also we're all quite creative, so I think we'll just
make do or find what you find. Yeah, but I mean, cheap clothes are the best, you know, like a charity shop or some, you know, I was in Hastings at the weekend and they're upstairs, everything was £1, you know, so it's like, let's just buy it, you know, buying 20 things, you know, I might wear them, I might not, you know, and that commitment of spending that money on something designer is, you know, I just don't like commitment too much generally, you know, it's not that exciting. So committing to spend £350 on a white shirt for me, this is just a bit like...
Also, if you go into like Selfridges and you're looking at Prada or something just for fun, I get this like horrible feeling like it's quite a weird environment to look at clothes in, and I actually start to feel a bit like depressed. Not because I can't buy, just because, I don't know really, it makes me feel really horrible. It's like quite a negative environment in a way, because there's people spending and it's about just like having stuff, and it sounds quite textbook, but I do feel quite like that, and I think it's the opposite thing when, so what Imogen said, and you just buy something for £1, it kind of like, oh well, if this works out, it works out, and if it doesn't, it's still a nice thing, so.
I think
Sorry, okay.
I think to invest in some, well, for me at the moment, I would never be able to invest in something like this, and also you can't really experiment investing, can you, in a way, like unless you're like rich.
Well, that's kind of what I was hinting at with this thing that high fashion is meant to be about expressing yourself, but as you say, you can't experiment, so if you do buy something, chances are it's quite a conservative purchase where you're like, this will last me a while and my mother will approve, because you don't want to kind of put all your eggs in one kind of crazy medium Kirchhoff basket if you're very aware that, you know, next season.
But I am all for it if there's an amazing you know, like me and Jet nearly bought banana Prada shirts. We didn't quite do it, but if there is an amazing, you know, piece that you're just like, I love it, then, you know, great, and, you know, then it's a nice thing to have. But for the sake of it, no, you know. So,
Andrew, what are your thoughts? You're kind of smiling at me from the room.
Well, I'm in a place right now where I'm like, do I really want to spend? Where do I want my money to go? Do I want it to be spent on like high street rubbish, or do I want it to be spent on creativity, something that's actually considered? And at the moment I'm like all for considered things, all for design.
Do you feel like high fashion is considered?
More so than I think.
Definitely more than high street, yeah.
I think not all high street fashion is considered, but there are elements and there are garments and there are designers that are more considered. And then also there are people as well, you want to be a part of that that world. You want to buy into that world, so you'll, I don't know, buy a perfume or buy something really cheap from that designer just because you want to feel like you're a part of it. But also there are people who are doing things that are way more considered, and I'd rather spend more money on something that's well considered and well designed than on crap from Topshop.
Do you agree, David?
I've been avoiding this because the other day I was at my friend's house. I bought some I buy a lot of vintage, and I bought this new shirt, and then I was at my friend's house and I like took it off and I was chatting, and then I got up to leave and I like turned around to pick it up, and I kind of for a second I was like, oh, my friend got these really ugly curtains. I was like, what did this happen? And I realised it was the shirt. It was like this like hideous like leaf pattern, and I thought it'd be great for September. So I think I want to go into, I do buy a lot of vintage and thrift and charity shops at the moment, but I think I would like to move towards buying like simple pieces that are like more considered, we'll say.
Have any of you guys ever bought Rick Owens? No. Would you like to buy Rick Owens?
I'd quite like a few pieces.
Why?
If someone wanted to give me Rick Owens, I would definitely take
You're
it.
like, hi there.
Hi, Rick.
Imogen, you shook your head. Are you not excited by the world of Rick Owens?
No. I mean, maybe the ideas behind it and some of his sort of transvestite and glam and goth, and, you know, there's some interesting culture to it, but no, I don't like the shapes or the... Have
you felt the fabrics, though?
And maybe now I can go to the gym in it. I might invest in it, but no. I have. It's sort of leather and sheepskin and luxe, and no, not for me. I get it, and there's a definite buyer, and you can spot it a mile off. But it's just not my shapes. I just don't find them all that asymmetric layering and drooping, and no.
Yeah. How about you guys?
it's not really what I would usually go for.
It's not. I would before we started talking.
This has changed your mind.
I love it. I think it's like a tennis dress. It's like Venus Williams. That's what it does remind me of that. Like amazing. I used to love Venus Williams when she won, and she was wearing this amazing white dress, and it kind of reminds me of that a bit.
Like a strong woman.
Like this, yeah, but kind of like there's like a character to it, and I didn't think there was before with Rick Owens, and I think it is because of the casting, which is quite. I didn't realise that, but it's quite a simple change, really. But I'm looking at this, and I'd love that dress. So do you guys want to change mine?
I finished rather quickly.
No.
Well, we're nearing the end of our discussion, but I want to ask one thing, which is, obviously we're talking about Paris Fashion Week at the moment, but just to bring this back to a London thing, when we did a lot of our London discussions, everyone talks about how the reason London's such an exciting fashion city is because of the colleges and because of that creative environment and those creative conversations. I don't want you to diss your colleges, but do you still feel that? Do you feel like privileged to be studying in those London colleges? Do you feel like it is this real creative hub where everyone's feeding each other?
Being at St Martin's and helping out around Show Studio, I'm so privileged to see so many incredibly talented people just like passing by all the time, and everyone is so amazing and everyone has like incredible potential, and you can see so many like this kind of amazing bubbling pot of creativity, and to just be in that situation is just incredible, and I wouldn't exchange that for anything.
Aww. Do you guys feel that at St Martin's, especially because I know there's a lot was made of that new building, but it's meant to inspire that feeling of like ultimate creativity from all different fields. It's amazing
that you've mentioned the new building, because I think that it doesn't serve its purpose, and I think that was one of the things we all look forward to from Charing Cross Road, was the new building. It's going to unite everyone.
Wander in on the sculptors and see what
we
they're doing.
We can do what they did in the 80s.
You've got a digital card that won't let you in anyway.
It does the opposite.
Don't get too excited.
I think that's one of the things that really upsets people, a lot of people at St Martin's, is the fact that we can't. It's promoted to be this place that has changed the way. It's an art school, but it's really not. It's not. It's completely not that. So that's a bit depressing. But I think it is still a privilege to be with those kind of people, because I think they're the people that really make it more than anything, really, more than your classes or whatever.
How about you, LCFers? Do you feel the same? Do you feel a real sort of pride being in London?
I do, because I'm from Yorkshire and it's kind of a completely different world. So just being in London for me is really incredible. And yeah, LCF, I mean, every college has its downside, but I do feel really lucky to be surrounded by people who are really passionate and have so much potential, like you said. It's just amazing. And then to intern somewhere that for me, you know, it's kind of like, it just felt so far away, but to be surrounded by these people and see them every day and be in the same office as them and just to hear the conversations, for me, is really exciting, and to be a part of it is incredible. I spent a long time not being involved, like it's only been a year and a bit that I've been involved in fashion, and I feel so happy.
Aww.
Yeah, it's great.
Do you agree, David? It's the same for you?
Yeah. I found it to be a really good environment for, I mean, obviously you'll meet a lot of great people in something like this, and there's a lot of collaboration, but also I think LCF is like really nurturing this thing at the moment where it's like, what are you like really interested in? So if you have something really strange to kind of throw into the mix and you want to like bring, I don't know, like psychology and fashion together or something, like you can do that, because it's like, well, this is valid. So there's a lot of room for like figuring out where you want to like fit in the fashion industry, and I think that's something that's really exciting at the moment. I really like.
God, I'm so jealous. All I want to do is go back to college. I think you're all incredible and such positivity. It's amazing. So thank you so much.
Thanks.
We're up there.